The dining room table had become a boardroom by 9 o'clock that night. Papers spread across the mahogany where family dinners used to happen, and Julian Voss sat at the head of it, signing away pieces of the only thing that had ever made sense to him. Initial here, and we'll need your signature on the final page by Thursday. The man across the table was Grant Ellery, 44, lead counsel for the investor group circling Julian's company like it was already carrion. Grant spoke the way men speak when they've already won and are simply waiting for the other party to notice. Julian, 39 days out from a divorce he hadn't seen coming, and 11 months into a funding crisis, had barely noticed anything lately. What was buried in Clause 14 would decide whether Julian lost his company entirely, and the only person who saw it wasn't invited to the table. Renata Cole stood in the doorway with a plate of crackers nobody had asked for, because 8-year-old Sophia Voss was upstairs asking for her father, and somebody needed to be the reason a child ate dinner in a house that had forgotten how to have normal evenings. Renata had been the Voss family's nanny for 14 months, hired through an agency that vetted for patience and discretion, and had no idea what else it was placing in that house. Not now. "Renata," Julian said without looking up, "we're in the middle of something. She should have left." She had left. Every other night, this negotiation bled into family hours, retreating upstairs to sit with Sophia and read the same 3 picture books until the girl fell asleep, asking when her dad was coming up. But something on the page facing her, upside down from where she stood, caught in her peripheral vision the way certain words catch when you've spent a decade trained to notice them. She set the plate down. "Can I see that page for a second?" Grant looked up first, mild amusement crossing his face, the specific amusement of a man being interrupted by household staff. "This isn't really the moment. It'll take 30 seconds. Julian, more out of exhaustion than curiosity, slid the page across the table without really deciding to. Renata picked it up, and something in her posture changed. The way a person's spine straightens when muscle memory outpaces conscious thought. If you believe expertise has no job, title and grace wears no resume, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today. Renata Cole was 37. For 9 years before she was anyone's nanny, she had been a corporate attorney at one of the city's sharpest firms, specializing in exactly the kind of investment agreements spread across this table. She had built a career on reading contracts the way musicians read scores, hearing what wasn't played as clearly as what was. She had also, in her 10th year, made partner the same week her marriage ended, not because of the promotion, though it hadn't helped, but because the man she'd married had spent their relationship needing her to be smaller than she was, and success had finally made that impossible to pretend around. She left the firm 18 months after the divorce finalized. Not fired, not disbarred, just done, burned through in a way that made another courtroom feel like drowning. She told the nanny agency she had office experience. She never told the Voss family more, because the story invited questions she wasn't ready for, and because watching Sophia Voss build block towers on a Tuesday had, for the first time in years, felt like peace instead of performance. She read Clause 14 twice. Then she looked up. This isn't a standard liquidation preference. It's stacked. If the company underperforms even slightly against these projections, and these are aggressive, probably intentionally so, Grant's group gets paid out first, in full before Julian sees $1 of his own equity. Not proportional. First, that's not how these are usually structured unless someone's counting on the projections. Failing. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go. Quiet when something true has just landed in a space, built for something else. Grant's expression flickered just barely, before resetting into practiced calm. That's a fairly aggressive read of a standard clause. It's not standard. I've drafted 11 of these. This is written to look standard to someone who hasn't spent a decade reading the ones that weren't. Julian sat up straighter for the first time in weeks. Wait, say that again, slower. The unsaid sat heavier than anything spoken. The divorce Renata never explained. The 10 years of expertise folded into a job description that only asked for patience and a valid driver's license. She explained it again, slower, walking Julian through the mechanism the way she once explained things to junior associates who needed the plain version before the technical one. By the time she finished, Julian's face had gone through 3 expressions: confusion, then alarm, then something that looked almost like grief for a decision he'd nearly made without understanding it. "How do you know this?" he asked, not accusatory. Genuinely asking, she almost said because it doesn't matter anymore. She almost said nothing at all, the way she'd trained herself to for 18 months. Instead, she said, "Because I used to do this for a living." Grant's head turned sharply toward her, and for the first time that night, real attention arrived on his face instead of performed patience. He studied her for a long moment, the plate of crackers, the sensible cardigan, recognition arriving slow and then all at once. Renata? She hadn't expected her own name to land like a blow. "Hello, Grant." Julian looked between them. "You two know each other?" The silence that followed answered before either of them did. Some rooms hold 2 conversations at once. The one about a contract, and the one that had been unfinished for 6 years, sitting quietly under everything else being said. Grant Ellery was the man Renata had married at 28 and left at 34. The man whose firm she'd once outpaced so thoroughly that colleagues asked him, half joking, whether he minded working in his wife's shadow. He had minded, in ways he never said aloud until the marriage was already collapsing under things unsaid, and by the time either tried to name what was wrong, there was nothing left to repair. Neither had spoken since the divorce finalized, and neither expected to speak again across a contract table, 6 years and an unrecognizable life later. "You're a nanny now," Grant said. It wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse. Bewildered, the tone of a man trying to reconcile the woman he remembered with the one standing in front of him, holding a cracker plate. "I'm Sophia's nanny," Renata said evenly. "And I just told your client's opposing party that Clause 14 of his contract is designed to fail him. Whether you want to argue that professionally or personally is up to you." Grant didn't argue it at all. He sat back, quiet for a long moment, and then did something none of them expected. He pulled the contract toward himself and started reading Clause 14 again. This time, the way Renata had taught him to read things years ago, back when they still taught each other things instead of competing over who knew more. "She's right," he said finally to Julian. "I didn't draft this clause. My associate did off a template, but she's right. I should have caught it." What passed between them in that moment wasn't reconciliation. It was something smaller and more honest. 2 people finally seeing each other clearly, in a room neither had planned to be in. Julian pulled the contract back and set it down like it had gotten heavier. "I'm not signing this," Grant nodded slowly. "I'll take it back to the group. We'll restructure the preference proportionally, or we walk. Either way, you deserve to know what you were signing." He looked at Renata once more before gathering his papers. "Thank you. I mean that." She nodded and didn't say anything else. Because some conversations end better unfinished than forced toward a resolution neither party is ready for. What Julian did in the weeks after wasn't dramatic. He renegotiated the deal on fairer terms, with a new attorney he hired specifically to review every clause the way Renata had. He also, quietly, asked her one evening while Sophia slept upstairs whether she'd ever consider going back, not to his deal, to the work itself, to a firm that would actually see what she could do. He didn't push. He made the offer plainly and let her decide. She didn't answer that night. She thought about it for 3 weeks, long enough to remember what the work had cost her the first time and what it might cost differently now that she knew what she was protecting herself from. When she finally said yes, it wasn't to Julian's company. It was to a small firm 2 towns over, contract law only, no partnership track, no late nights that swallowed a marriage, the kind of practice she'd have laughed at once and now recognized as exactly enough. Sophia cried when Renata told her about the new job, until Renata promised she'd still pick her up on Fridays no matter what. She's kept that promise for 2 years now. Somewhere in a dining room that used to be for family dinners, a woman nobody thought to ask read a contract nobody else could, and read her own life clearly again for the first time in years. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage and grace. And tell us, has someone ever underestimated what you were capable of right before you proved them wrong?